I want to thank everyone for being here. December 1st, the beginning of what is considered the holiday season, at least for many of us here. And I think it's very topical. We're talking about fair trade as part of our consumer buying behavior. This mic projects, just by the way, Al, when you get up here, you don't have to hold it that close. So I wanted to thank Alan and Mary Lou Davis, who have generously sponsored not only our speaker series, of which this is the third, but also, as you guys know, we have an exciting conference coming up March 4th, 5th, and 6th. We're doing a startup weekend. It'll be USF's 4th startup weekend, but this one is going to be focused on tech for good. And then we're going to front end that on Friday, March 4th, with the Conscious Capitalism Conference, our first. And we just really want to thank the generosity and thoughtfulness with both Alan and Mary Lou. Can we give them a round of applause? So Alan wanted to come up and say a few words, so we were going to start with that, and then I'll come back up and introduce Paul Rice.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm Alan Davis. I run a family foundation, and we had the good fortune to be able to make a gift to USF to help promote this program. So that's why I get the honor to speak. And I was trying to start with a joke, and I was struggling. I was thinking, you know, how many social entrepreneurs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, it didn't go anywhere because they don't screw in light bulbs. They, you know, use natural lighting and all kinds of other things. So I couldn't go anywhere with that one. So we'll skip the joke. And so I have a good friend, and some of you may have even known him as Dr. Harari or Professor Harari. I only knew him as Oren. And some of you may have had his class and known him as the absent-minded professor. I only knew his lovable, youthful, inappropriateness side. But Oren and I shared many interests. Tennis was one, but he was better than I was, and music was another, but he was better than I was. But when it came to entrepreneurships, we shared a long history of involvement. In fact, my father actually was a social entrepreneur and started perhaps one of the biggest socially responsible businesses of all time, perhaps only bested by the Catholic Church. And because he had started the insurance engine that led to the creation of an organization some of you may have heard of called AARP. It's hard to believe that, or even imagine that when my father co-founded AARP in 1958, there was no Medicare, virtually no insurance of any kind for people over 65. AARP made accessible for the first time to an aging population health, life, and auto insurance, low-cost drugs, specialized travel services, even employment services. And I must have inherited the social entrepreneur bug, because in the mid-70s, after Earth Day, but before recycled printing and writing paper was anything more than a cute idea, I started a marketing company to promote recycled paper, and ended up, I guess we were somewhat responsible for almost all of the papers that now bear the printed on recycled paper label. Also in the 70s, I ran a charitable foundation, a different one, that was one of the leaders in promoting socially responsible investing and also program-related investments, allowing foundations to use their investments to promote their social agenda, what many now refer to as social impact investing. It goes back a long ways. That's 40 years. Anyhow, now good grant making is pretty much like social entrepreneurship. It requires a certain set of skills, it requires passion, and then a healthy dose of luck. And in creating the Harari Leadership and Social Innovation Endowment, we were extremely lucky. We knew we wanted to honor Oren in a way that represented our shared interest in social entrepreneurship, but we were lucky that he was a professor in the USF. I went to USC, forget that. Sort of the antithesis of what we're talking about here today. Anyhow, I hope, anyone graduate USC here? We're good. Okay. Thank God. All right. Thank you. Anyhow, we were lucky that he was a professor at USF, in the USF School of Management, because unlike most business schools, and that was my point there, it is one committed to the principles wherein business leaders emphasize stakeholder value over shareholder return. And as an aside, I'll mention that I'm proud to have a stepson who, starting with a few empty bottles of empty wine bottles, has created the largest winery in Oregon. But most important, it was the first winery in the world to be certified as a B Corp, exemplifying a commitment to shareholders, employees, customers, and the environment. But getting back to being lucky, if I can get this one to turn. We were lucky that the School of Management is actually within the University of San Francisco, whose core values are to create a more humane, just, and sustainable world. And we were extremely lucky that USF has chosen for the School of Management a new dean, the first female dean, Elizabeth Davis. No relation, other than being someone who is even more passionate about the potential for social entrepreneurship and fostering this spirit in her students. So we are lucky that we can honor my good friend Oren Harari in this appropriate, meaningful way, and that we have the means to help, the foundation has the means to help USF as it embarks on its mission to build USF as a hub for social entrepreneurship. USF will teach students the skills needed and then help them tap their passions. And we wish everyone connected with this endeavor the best of luck. And thank you very much, and I very much look forward to hearing Paul speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for those thoughtful comments. I should have introduced myself earlier. By the way, I'm an assistant professor here. Many of the students here are in my ethics, socially responsible business class. Can you guys raise your hand? And I'm also the faculty sponsor for Net Impact on their National Board of Directors. How many Net Impactors are here? From every school, not just from USF. I know we've got some visitors too from Holt as well, so welcome. I'm actually the program director. I just got my business cards on recycled paper today, although I've been it for a little bit of conscious leadership and social innovation. So this is actually what I'm doing. I'm so thrilled to be doing it. I also happen to sit on the Fair Trade USA Board of Directors, and have work closely with Paul on some of the new strategic initiatives that he's and his organization is taking charge of. But we're here to talk today about fair trade and where it's going over the next 20 years, and then how we should think about fair trade today within our evolving body of research and communities involved with conscious capitalism and conscious purchasing. And so I just want to give a brief introduction to Paul Rice. So it's always interesting to introduce Paul because I've gotten to know him through both writing a case, which is available through Harvard Publishing. By the way, serendipitously, it just came out in California Management Review. I printed it down this morning. So if you guys want a copy of that, you can read that as well. I'll happily give you a copy of that case too. So he's a founder and CEO of Fair Trade USA, originally known as Transfair. He received the Ashoka Fellowship for Social Entrepreneurship. He's a 4-time winner the Fast Companies Magazine Social Capitalist of the Year. He won the Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship. He was named one of the World Economic Forum's top 40 social entrepreneurs. And you should also know this is near and dear to his heart, what he's doing, because he was actually a farmer for a fair trade cooperative in Nicaragua for 11 years. He didn't want me to read all that, but I talk fast as a former investment banker, so I think it's all good. Without further ado, let me introduce Paul Rice. Paul?
I think I have enough mics on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right, we're in business. So it is great to be here. I'm so excited to be here today. I feel so lucky to be able to do what I do and to have a chance to share it with bright, insightful, engaged people who always ask amazing questions and share great feedback about fair trade and what we're doing. So my goal today is to keep my remarks fairly brief and then open it up. I'm really eager to hear your questions and your thoughts. So maybe I'll start by talking a little bit about my journey and how I kind of got to the space of responsible business and conscious capitalism. As a college student, I was interested in international development. I was passionate about issues of poverty and social justice. I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to make a difference. So right out of college, I went to Nicaragua to work with farmers. And I thought I would stay for a year or two, but I fell in love. I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the work, and I ended up staying in the field for 11 years. And for much of that time, I was working on one international aid program after another, really well-intentioned projects that were designed by really bright, well-intentioned people sitting in Paris and London and New York and sending millions of well-intentioned aid dollars to help us lift farmers out of poverty. And my experience over time was really an unhappy one, because what I discovered was that model is broken. That top-down, aid-driven model, at least in my experience, didn't really equip farmers with their own capacity to solve their own problems. And especially with regard to the market, we didn't really help farmers figure out how to navigate the market in an effective way. And so more often than not, what I found was that they were just recreating dependency on foreign aid. I got really sad and disillusioned with that and almost left the country, but in the summer of 1990, had a chance to pivot and heard about, just kind of by accident, these crazy people in Europe who called themselves fair traders. And for them, fair trade was all about companies buying direct from farmers and paying a better price for a high-quality product. So in the summer of 1990, I organized Nicaragua's first fair trade co-op. We pulled together 20 coffee farmers, really small farmers, 1 acre, 2 acres each. So between the 20 of them, we were able to fill 1 container of coffee, which is the smallest amount that you can export. We shipped it to a fair trade buyer in Europe. And they paid us $1.20 per pound for our coffee at a time when the local middleman was offering 10 cents a pound. So after cost, we were able to get our farmers $1 a pound net, 10 times more than they otherwise would have made. And just to put that in context, typically on 1 or 2 acres of land, you can grow about 2,000 pounds of coffee a year, about a ton of coffee. So 2,000 pounds times 10 cents a pound meant that most of those farmers or their neighbors were getting around $200 a year. That was their total cash income, right? Less than $1 a day. And instead, we were able to get our farmers $1 a pound, so around $2,000 per family that year, which was more money than most of those families had ever seen. And as you might guess, I was a pretty popular guy that year. I got a new nickname, Pablo Un Dólar. It was all about the $1 a pound. And over the next 4 years, we organized over 3,000 farmers throughout northern Nicaragua into this co-op. And we were able, through that scale, to buy our own mill and to process and add value to the product and continue to sell it direct. We were improving the quality. And so it was very much about the product itself, right, and about the value that we were offering to the market. And so we were able to generate a revenue stream that was really unprecedented in that region. And by virtue of all of that extra income, we were able to do remarkable things in the communities. We were digging wells and bringing clean drinking water into communities for the first time. We were building schools. We set up scholarship programs. School is technically free, but to go to high school, you need, in Nicaragua anyway, you need a uniform. And the high school's probably 5 miles down the road, so you need bus money. So that, we calculated on average, kids needed around $200 a year to go to high school. And $200 a year was a wall locking generation after generation out of high school. So we set up scholarship programs so that everyone and all the kids in these villages could go on to high school. We did health programs. We had youth sports leagues. We taught farmers how to cultivate the land using organic techniques, and we brought the first organic certification in Nicaragua. In short, all of this change, all of this progress, and none of it thanks to foreign aid. None of it thanks to government regulation or government intervention. It was all made possible thanks to a more direct connection with the market and an organizational framework that allowed farmers to harness their entrepreneurial spirit and reap the benefits of opportunities in the global market. So, of course, the dividend, the invisible dividend around all of this was the hope and the pride and the dignity and the self-confidence of people who were changing their lives for themselves, not because someone else had done it for them. So that whole journey really rocked my world and changed my thinking about business and the role of business in sustainability, the role of business in social responsibility. And I came to believe that business and markets could quite possibly be the most powerful force for change that we could hope to have. And then instead of trying to help farmers opt out of the global economy, on the contrary, I needed to help farmers opt into the global economy and help them capture opportunities in the global economy through a more empowered insertion in that inevitable reality, because we live in the global economy. The coffee we're drinking, the clothes we're wearing, so much of what we consume is produced globally. And that holds huge opportunities for farmers who otherwise would be left behind by much of globalization. So I moved back here, did an MBA at UC Berkeley, and launched Fair Trade USA in 1998. And let me tell you a little bit about Fair Trade USA and what we do. So Fair Trade USA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our mission is to fight poverty and promote sustainable development around the world using market-based approaches, using the power of the market and the power of consumers. And so concretely, our role in that, we don't buy or sell product. Our role is to certify products. So we work with over 900 brands, from small, local brands to major global brands like PepsiCo and Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. We're working with Costco. We're working with Whole Foods, even Walmart. And by certifying the products that those companies buy and that are sourced according to fair trade standards, we're helping those companies engage more directly with farmers and workers and help improve their lives. So we certify those products. And for farmers to get the fair trade certification, they have to meet a rigorous standard, over 200 criteria in the fair trade standard that farmers are audited against every year, much like an organic certification, and that verify that farmers are working in a sustainable way. Our standard covers social, labor, economic, and environmental criteria. So that's our core function, to certify product and to offer you as consumers a guarantee that when you see that fair trade label, you know that product was produced sustainably and farmers got a better deal. We also run farmer training programs, because for farmers to be successful working with demanding companies like Whole Foods and Starbucks, farmers need to be able to produce quality. They need to be able to deliver on time. So we do a lot of training through a whole ecosystem of partner organizations, farmer training to help them be effective and competitive. And then finally, we work with consumer engagement, because at the end of the day, fair trade only works if we buy the product. So consumer activation, consumer awareness is very much a part of our core function. So a quick review of the numbers. We've been around for 17 years, 900 plus partnerships. Fair trade products are available now in about 300,000 stores across the United States. We're certifying now not just coffee, but also tea and chocolate, sugar, rice, all kinds of fruits and vegetables, and growing the product line every year. Increasingly, companies are coming to us asking us, can you adapt that model that you developed for coffee to the fill-in-the-blank product category? So 2 years ago, we launched coconut water with Pepsi. And we just started certifying apparel and home goods, working with Patagonia and West Elm and Pottery Barn. We started certifying fish last year, so we have fair trade fish for the first time. It's helping fishermen get a better deal. You can find that at Safeway. So what's interesting is not just the breadth and the expansion of fair trade across all kinds of different product categories, but the kinds of companies that are coming to us saying, we want to explore this model too. Increasingly, it's not just the kind of high-end specialty or natural food segment that's looking at this model, but also the mainstream companies like Safeway. We have great metrics on the impact of our work in terms of the dollars that we're able to generate for farmers and workers around the world. And to date, we've generated more than $350 million in above-market pricing and income that's going back to farmers in about 45 countries around the world, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And having worked in the field and seen how much of the development aid investment really had very little return for farmers in terms of concrete income and sustainability, it's incredibly gratifying to see fair trade create the platform for farmers and workers to generate their own increased income. 59% consumer awareness. So 59% of Americans, when shown the fair trade label, can tell us that they've seen it and can give an accurate description of what it means. And about 15%, so considerably less, but about 15% of American consumers now are buying fair trade products. That's about 35 million people. So that's, for me, both the good news and the bad news, because obviously we want every consumer to be aware of all the options and the opportunity to make a difference through their purchases. So let me talk about consumers for a minute, and then we'll open it up. It feels to us like there's a macro trend at play in terms of consumer behavior, not just in this country, but around the world. And I would describe that phenomenon as conscious consumerism. Increasingly, we are asking, where does my stuff come from? Where does my food come from? Is it healthy? Is it safe? We're asking those questions. We're asking what the impact of our food and our other product choices are. Is there child labor in this? Is there environmental degradation in this product? Increasingly, consumers are asking to know more. And that, in turn, is leading to a dramatic increase in things like fair trade, certifications and products that tell a story and that reassure us that we're not doing harm with the things that we buy and with the products that we consume. That reassure us that, in fact, we're on the right side of history. And I don't think any of us would feel good drinking a cup of coffee if we thought that children had been involved in picking those coffee berries. So that growing awareness of the interconnectedness of the global economy, that growing awareness of where products come from, and that growing desire on our part to know and be reassured about the origin of those products, that is, in my estimation, a rising tide and an opportunity for us all to make a difference. You know, I think not just those of us here today, but the American public in general and beyond our borders around the world, I think ordinary people know that we're in a world of hurt, poverty and climate change, so many problems. And yet, so many of us feel disempowered. We don't know how to make a difference. We don't know what we can do. So many of us feel disaffected with the political process, like our voice isn't heard, like the little political process only serves the vested interests and not really aimed at solving the problems that we find of most concern. So, how amazing to realize that with something as simple as a brownie or a cup of coffee, we can reach halfway across the world and help families keep their kids in school. That we can kind of cut through the ineffectiveness of political process or government intervention or NGOs and reach halfway across the world and make a difference on our own every time we buy something. That's a very empowering notion. And I believe it's what is driving the growth of fair trade and so many other products and certifications and things like it that really appeal to our best selves and give us a sense that our voice is being heard. I think that trend is at an interesting moment of intersection with a trend in the business community around supply chains. Because companies are increasingly realizing that the global supply chain is actually relevant to the success of the business. That supply chains that are weak or at risk of reputational, that hold reputational risk are in fact of risk to the business. And so the people that we talk to in the business community are increasingly wondering how they can get a more transparent and traceable supply chain. They want to know what's happening in factories and farms on the other side of the world. They want to know where their products are coming from. They want to know that the right quantity and quality are going to be available for the long term. They want to know that the company's not going to get bit in the ass by a child labor scandal or a factory fire that kills workers. And so for all kinds of reasons, for reputational reasons, for supply chain resilience and security reasons, companies are increasingly wanting to know more as well, and increasingly wanting to make sure that workers and farmers on the other end of the world, on the other end of that supply chain, are in fact able to stay in business and able to provide for themselves. And so I think these two tendencies, the rise of conscious consumerism and the rise of the business community's interest in more transparent and sustainable supply chains, gives us a remarkable opportunity right now. As students of business, as future business leaders, as people who care about the world that we live in, we have a remarkable opportunity. And so my invitation to you is to seize that opportunity. Seize that intersection between conscious consumerism and more responsible business. Thank you.
So I'm going to start us off, and then the way this works is we are videotaping this. We're planning to create a website for all three speakers we've had over the last month. And so just know that when you ask a question, ask your question, but you are being videotaped, so you are automatically consenting to that by asking a question. So
make sure it's a smart question.
Yeah, make yourself look good, and feel free to say your name when you ask a question. So Paul, and this isn't the case, by the way, so this is nothing that we haven't discussed before, but when you look at branching out beyond coffee, which is something so dearly, and then tea and other associated, but now looking at West Elm having rugs that are fair trade certified, what has that expansion been like for your organization when you look at going into vastly different product segments?
Well, certifying factories is obviously very different from certifying coffee farms. Most of the coffee farms that we work with are small family farmers organized into co-ops. So the issue to solve there isn't so much one of wages, because those farmers don't earn wages. They have a harvest price. And so the issue there is how to ensure that those farmers have access to the market and are able to get a better price. So the standards are actually geared toward a very different production model than what you would see in a factory setting, where the issue is wage workers and worker safety and health, safety in the factory, and the journey to living wage. So as an organization, we've had to really kind of embrace the core principles of fair trade, but then adapt them to a very different production setting. And then similarly, as we think about consumer engagement and talking to consumers about fair trade, I think most consumers that have been aware of fair trade in the past have really associated it with coffee and maybe other food products. And so just awakening consumers to a growing range of different products that really speak to the same values and the same impact that poses challenges too. But it's a fun challenge.
Okay, let's go and open it up. And let me get to you with a mic. So Seamus, why don't you stay where you are and I'll come to you. I think that'll be easier.
I'm Seamus, JD MBA student. With regard to you spreading into other areas in addition to foodstuffs or coffee specifically, do you worry at all that you're going to dilute your brand's identity? And have you thought about introducing a second label to ensure protection from that?
Well, what's your advice? I'm a $12 million nonprofit, so I'll never be able to run a Super Bowl ad. I'm trying to brand my label right now with very limited resources. Should I launch a second label?
I see a whole lot of head shakes going on over here. Well, I don't know. How successful has your non-food considerations been? So you're brand new, right?
Yeah, so non-food is 2 years old in the case of apparel. So, I'm happy with the initial success and just in terms of the brands that have joined. Patagonia obviously is a great brand to join, and I've spent some time recently in an office building just a block from here, which, an apparel company that, is, I think, indicative of the direction that the apparel industry is going, insofar as I think there's growing awareness that the traditional model of factory monitoring, where someone comes in from the outside and spends a day, a year in the factory, that model really doesn't give us a good idea what's happening in that factory the other 364 days a year. And so I see a lot of corporate interest in exploring fair trade as an alternative or as an add-on to kind of the traditional factory monitoring. In terms of consumer awareness, we're just getting started. I don't think most consumers are at all aware. Well, let's just do some market research. So first of all, before you came in here, be honest, who here had heard about fair trade? Show of hands. Yeah. All right. So who here knew that we certified coffee? Of course you did. And okay, before you read the case, who here knew that we were doing apparel? Right. So consumer awareness around the new products is really quite nascent. And that, I think, in answer to your question about is it diluting the brand? I don't think so. I think the brand doesn't stand for coffee or tea or a product category. I think the brand stands for better business. A lot of consumers understand, I think, at a fairly detailed level what fair trade certified means. But a lot of consumers don't. They just see it as a product certification, and they have a basic understanding that it means better wages and a better life for those who produced it. And that core value obviously transcends product categories. So if I had the resources, I might have the option of a different label for manufacturing, but we don't have the resources anyway. So I think what we're trying to do is weave together that brand message, if you will, in a way that transcends the specific products. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie O'Donnell. I'm a recent graduate from the MBA program. Hi, as many of you I recognize. Hi, guys. I think one other question, if you move, this thing doesn't really work as well. Seamus was asking about marketing, and really it comes down to the fact that you're moving not just a brand, you're moving a movement. But my question actually has more to do with the other side of things, not so much about conscious capitalism, but what you're doing in communities. So all of the studies are recently showing this massive shift of populations in developing regions towards cities, where people are choosing to live in slums outside of cities rather than on the lands that they were born in. They're letting go of their cultures. So I'm curious, in addition to the work you're doing with communities for coffee and for fair trade certification for a lot of other things, what are you doing to maybe in the future, maybe fair trade can help somehow with pulling people back to these places that they've left, knowing that the benefits exist for them to go recreate their lives? So for the brain drains that are going towards the cities and the slums, how can we reverse that pull to get populations back to where they came from to keep doing these things, living and live a life that they can be proud of?
Yeah. Great question. So obviously, that starts with creating sustainable livelihoods in rural communities themselves. And that's what we're trying to do, obviously. So if we can make, there we go. If we can make coffee and cocoa and banana farming profitable again for small family farmers, we can create a context, an economic context in which they can stay on the land. It's interesting, most of the world's cocoa for chocolate comes from West Africa, Ghana and Ivory Coast, about 60% of global supply. And in Ghana today, the average age of a cocoa farmer is 52. And the reason for that is that the youth are all leaving the land, to your point, in search of better opportunities in the city. Cocoa farming is not seen as a viable livelihood anymore in West Africa. And so that data is actually part of what is driving a lot of activity on the part of the cocoa industry around sustainable farming in West Africa, because the big chocolate companies are concerned that within a decade, they may not have a sufficient supply of cocoa to continue their businesses. And so both with fair trade and other approaches, a lot of the cocoa companies and chocolate companies are now looking to invest in West African farming, in productivity, in sustainable farming, in shade-grown cocoa that gives us a longer-term productivity horizon for cocoa trees. And ultimately, those investments and that market access and that partnership between the corporate community and the farmers themselves is what gives me optimism that we will be able to stabilize rural economies and help people who want to stay on the land stay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Akshat, and I'm a full-time MBA student. So my question comes as a consumer. If I go in a coffee shop, the regular coffee costs me $4, and a fair trade coffee costs me about $4.5. So how do I know what percentage of this money goes to the farmers, or what percentage of this money the company actually spends in the benefit of the farmers? So as Fair Trade USA, how do you check this? And do you have any punishments or punishments if a company does not comply with your standards?
Absolutely. So we have both farming standards for the farmers that we audit and certify every year, and then trade standards for the companies that we are working with. And the trade standards are simple, but they address how companies interact with farmers and the terms of trade and the pricing that they pay. we don't regulate consumer pricing. We don't, we're trying to direct the market, not control the market or block the market. And for us to try and dictate to companies what is an appropriate consumer price would be unrealistic, frankly. What we've seen is that as more brands have come into the fair trade space, as you might guess, consumer prices come down on fair trade products because there's more competition. So, fair trade fish, it's only available, there's only one fair trade fish product, and it's only available in one retail outlet, and there's a $2 per pound markup on it, and that doesn't make me happy. I think sales would be better with a $1 markup on that product. By the way, if you like tuna steaks, ahi tuna steaks, line caught from Indonesia, Safeway, fair trade certified. It's really good. And the ahi tuna steaks, the normal, conventional, non-fair trade, are $8 a pound. The fair trade certified is $10 a pound. That, for me, doesn't make me happy, right? Because only a small portion of that is going back to the farmer. So that's Safeway's way of kind of capturing the value of a new product that's exclusive, momentarily exclusive on the market. That's going to change. It's changed in coffee, it's changed in tea, it's changed in chocolate, it's changed in all the products that we've launched over the years, right? As more people come into the market, there's price competition even on the fair trade products, and consumer pricing comes down. Typically, fair trade products today are, all things being equal, like, for example, country of origin and quality. If you hold those equal, a fair trade product is typically only about 5% more to the consumer than a comparable product that's not fair trade. That seems to be a premium that consumers are willing to pay in order to get a product that is more sustainable and more responsible, and it makes us feel good. So I don't have a problem with a 5% markup. I don't like a 20 or 25% markup. I think that really limits the market growth, but I think the market will solve that. So that's not outside of the parameters of our standard. You asked, do we punish companies for not adhering to the standard? Absolutely. So if a company doesn't pay the established fair trade premium for a product, then they can't certify that product. If companies don't open their books and allow us to audit their books and verify the transactions on a quarterly basis, then they'll lose their certification. So there are clear criteria around basically terms of trade and transparency in the audit process that companies have to adhere to in order to remain certified.
Hey, Paul. My name's Tom. I'm a MBA student here at USF. So with such a strong understanding of the socially conscious supply chain, such valuable partnerships with these farmers and suppliers, and such a keen insight into what parts of the world really need help and how to develop these clusters of economic development in rural areas where there are lots of farms, you have really the breadth of understanding of the whole supply chain. My question to you is, why don't you grow or manufacture your own fair trade branded products and sell them as sort of maybe a generic product to I guess compete against some of the other brands that you would certify, sort of as another stream of revenue beyond just certification?
Believe me, I've thought about that a lot. And over the years, I've given a lot of talks to a lot of MBA classes where people have emerged with great ideas for fair trade products, and I love coaching and mentoring and seeing those businesses grow up, so I strongly encourage you to do what you just suggested that I do. For me, it's kind of a judge and jury thing, so we can't be both the independent third-party certifier and then also compete with the companies that we're certifying by selling product on our own. Does that make sense? So, from the very beginning. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the integrity of the audit and certification that we provide really depends on us kind of staying out of the commercial realm. But you know, I think there's, to your point, I think there's a lot of opportunity for new entrants into this space and new companies that are emerging all the time and carving out, carving out their niche or making their impact in terms of new fair trade product lines.
Hello, I'm John. I'm an MBA student. My question has to do with competing fair trade certifiers. It seems like your organization included that all of these certifiers have this sort of unselfish motivation for doing this. Would it make more sense to consolidate to become sort of one brand of fair trade certifier to pool the resources and maybe make it a little bit easier for consumers to see, oh, there's one label versus maybe 3 or 4 on a product?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have 3 fair trade labels in the U.S. today. So there's definitely different choices, different labels. And to your point, the downside of that is the risk of just dispersion of energy and effort and the risk of consumer awareness being diluted by the fact that there are multiple choices. On the other hand, I think it's a good thing that companies have a choice in who they want to certify their products. And the multiple options in the fair trade world kind of mirror what we have seen in the organic certification world historically, where there were many different organic certification companies offering farmers and brands their services. And obviously when you have competition, then you have typically better service and lower costs, and you have a better functioning market. So, for many years, we were the only fair trade certifier in the United States. For 12 of our 17 years, we were the only fair trade certifier. And over the last 5 years, we've seen 2 new entrants coming into the U.S. market, offering similar services to ours, verifying similar standards to ours. And I love it. I mean, competition is a good thing. It's making me and my team work harder and be more innovative and be smarter. And so, there could be a downside to it, but right now I only see upside. The reality is fair trade is such a small part of the U.S. economy. There's so much room to grow that actually I think a couple of more entrants into this space would be a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
My name is Helen. I'm a MBA student here. As you mentioned earlier, consumer awareness is very important. There are many companies, they spend like a huge amount of money on advertising, but as a nonprofit company, how do you advertise your business? How do you promote consumer awareness? Thank you.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging because we're a small organization. So typically we get the word out to consumers through our brand partners. So all of our brand partners, you put our label, the Fair Trade Certified label, on their packaging. And often on the back, there'll be a description of what fair trade is and maybe some information about the origin, the farmer, the community, or the impact. And maybe the URL for Fair Trade Certified so that people can go to our website if they want more information. That's when we survey consumers and ask them how they found out about fair trade, number one answer is they saw the label on a package and they read. Another way that we reach consumers, obviously, is through social media. We also have a grassroots consumer awareness campaign. We have a Fair Trade Universities campaign, a Fair Trade Towns campaign. So in different communities around the country, we help consumers come together, or advocates come together, to be brand ambassadors and to help spread the word. And that's proven very effective. We have campaigns right now on about 300 campuses around the United States. And when students come together to launch a fair trade campaign on campus, their goal is to get fair trade products served in the dining halls and the cafes on campus, to get fair trade into the curriculum of the university. And so very concrete ways to get engaged and to help spread the word. And that's been an important initiative for us as well. And then obviously traditional media. We've been lucky to get a lot of coverage in mainstream media, and that's helped spread the word about fair trade as well. But it's challenging. We're not like a normal brand that has a real budget to deploy for things like that. So it's really for us all about leveraging our brand partners and leveraging the grassroots consumer movement to get the word out about fair trade.
Hi, my name is Keshav. I'm also an MBA student. I just wanted to know how much and what kind of work goes into developing those 200 standards for sustainability for your farmers.
A lot of research. So we have research at different countries of origin around different products to look at the cost of sustainable production. So what does it cost to produce a pound of coffee in a sustainable way? Paying decent wages, taking care of the environment, and so on. And that cost of sustainable production research is part of our of what informs the fair trade standard around pricing and premiums. And then we use a lot of the literature that's already out there in terms of sustainable agriculture and agroecology to kind of define the specific land stewardship criteria that are in our model as well. There's been a lot of work done around sustainable agriculture over the last 20 years, and so you'll see a lot of that embedded in our standards as well. We don't require that farmers go organic, but our farming criteria have a pretty strict list of criteria around land usage, around conserving water resources, around conserving forest, around soil conservation. So, most people, when they think of fair trade, they think of just kind of the social or the labor aspect, but there's also a strong farming component and sustainable agriculture component to it as well. And a lot of that, we don't have to do that research ourselves because academic institutions and agricultural research institutions are already doing a lot of great work there. Hi.
Hi. Hi, I'm JJ, MBA student. I have a question. Have you ever thought to cancel the fee for the company who want their fair trade certified? Or you change to another form of the fee, like the percentage from the company who sell like the fair trade products? Thank you.
Sure. Let me see if I understood your question. Are you asking me, did we ever, have we thought about canceling the fee or eliminating the fee?
Yeah, and maybe change to another form, like the percentage from the company when they sell the fair trade products. Yeah.
So actually, the fees that we charge companies for the audit are often a percentage of wholesale price fee. That's so. And I didn't explain our revenue model earlier. We're a nonprofit organization. When we started, we were 100% funded through grants and donations. But early on, we realized that to be sustainable, we needed to develop other sources of revenue. So we developed an earned revenue model in which we charge companies for the audit and certification, the product certification that we provide. And typically that fee is set as a percentage of wholesale price. Sometimes it's set as a percentage of the FOB price in the country of origin, but it's a volume-based fee, which means that as the volume of fair trade products grows, we earn more money. So last year, out of a $12 million budget, $9 million was earned revenue, so about 75% earned revenue, and about $3 million or 25% was grants and donations. So yeah, we're always looking at the revenue model. We never want our fees to be an obstacle to companies joining fair trade. Obviously, we don't have shareholders that we have to deliver profits back to. So when we plow everything back into growing the organization, and we're able to keep fees fairly low. But at the end of the day, as we grow and as our size and scale grows, then I think we'll be able to lower lower the rate that we're charging. Typically, right now, we're charging around 1% of wholesale price. And, you know, there are a lot of companies that would love to pay less than that. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Allison, and I'm studying social entrepreneurship at Holt International Business School. And I have kind of a follow-up question to what you just talked about. So I was wondering why you decided to go with the nonprofit model and the sorts of like opportunities and challenges that have kind of come along with that decision.
That's a great question. So I love the fact that today change makers, MBA students, social entrepreneurs are kind of agnostic to nonprofit versus for-profit entities as a vehicle for changing the world. I think that's really cool. It didn't always used to be that way, right? So, you know, there was a time when there was an assumption that if you wanted to do good in the world, it had to be with a nonprofit. And if you worked in a for-profit, then it must mean that you were only interested in yourself and in making money, right? And that was very much true when I got my MBA in '96. But add on to that the reality that I'm running a certification organization that's kind of, in some ways, above commerce, right? We're certifying commerce, but we're not in commerce. And so it felt at the time like to maximize the credibility and the integrity of the certification label, we needed to take economic self-interest out of the equation and just set it up as a mission-driven nonprofit organization. Felt like we would have more cooperation from the companies. The companies are opening their books to us, and they know that their competitors are opening their books to us too. So we have to be really, really careful with information. We have to really always keep the integrity and the credibility of the organization and the audit and the certification in mind. And so it just felt like the best way to do that particular venture was to do it as a nonprofit, aside from kind of the cultural, you know, judgmental nature of, you know, change makers at that time. I think fast forward today, I mean, I might still, if I were doing a certification organization like this one, I might still choose nonprofit for those reasons. But in general, I think it's fantastic to see so many for-profit businesses that are driving sustainability and driving good values into the heart of business. You know, I think a lot of us have been really frustrated with, you know, what has felt like a conflict between sustainability and responsibility on the one hand and profitability on the other. You know, for so long, it has felt like those two were at odds with each other. And if you wanted to do the right thing and be sustainable, that came at the expense of profits. And if you wanted to be profitable as a venture, well, you couldn't really afford to think too deeply or spend too much money on sustainability. And, you know, corporate philanthropy and CSR, a lot of that has been kind of added on, but outside of the business model. And so what inspires me so much today is that social entrepreneurs are driving good values and sustainability into the heart of the business model, right? It's breaking that contradiction and really wedding sustainability and profitability in a way that's driving transformative change.
So can we all thank Paul Rice for being here today?
Thank you.